So, once again, welcome everyone to this event today. The first thing that I would like to do is do a brief roll call for all of the wonderful organizations that have supported this event today. We got a lot of support from local organizations, and we'll also be highlighting some organizations who are not listed on the flyer, but who also do really great work in the St. Louis area. So I'm just going to roll call the organizations. If that's your organization or that's the organization that you like to support, feel free to give yourself a round of applause, and then I'm going to move to the next one. So the first organization, Arch City Defenders. The Organization for Black Struggle. The Deaconess Foundation. The Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. The Justice for Reggie Clemens campaign. Hands Up United. Empower Missouri. Faith for Justice. St. John's the Beloved Community. And Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Epsilon Lambda chapter. And of course, Missourians Organizing for Reform and Empowerment, and all of our wonderful Decarcerate St. Louis members. Okay, well, we're ready to get started. I would like to first introduce our moderators for the evening. Our first moderator is the wonderful Miss Kayla Reed. Kayla Reed is an organizer with the Organization for Black Struggle, and today she is our senior St. Louis City politics correspondent. So please give Miss Kayla Reed a round of applause. Kayla, would you stand? That works. And our other moderator for the evening is Mr. Blake Strode. Blake Strode is an attorney with Arch City Defenders law firm, and he is our criminal justice correspondent for the evening. Blake Strode. All right. So now I'll introduce our wonderful candidates for St. Louis City Circuit Attorney. Our candidates are going to have, our moderators will introduce the rules of the presentation as soon as we get started. The first candidate is Miss Mary Pat Carl. She lives in the 16th Ward in St. Louis Hills neighborhood. She graduated with her law degree from Washington University in 2002, and she currently works as the lead homicide prosecutor at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office. She graduated from Incarnate Word Academy. Our second candidate is Miss Kimberly Gardner. Kimberly Gardner lives in the 18th Ward in the Central West End neighborhood. She graduated with her law degree from St. Louis University in 2012. She currently works as the state representative in the 77th District, and she is the in-house counsel and funeral director for Eddie Randall and Sons, Inc. Ms. Kim Gardner. Oh, sorry. So she graduated from law school in 2003, excuse me. Our next candidate is Patrick Hamacher. Patrick lives in the 7th Ward in the Lafayette Square neighborhood. He graduated with his law degree from the University of Missouri. He currently works as the assistant circuit attorney in the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, and he attended DeSmet Jesuit High School. And last but certainly not least is candidate Steven Harmon. Steven Harmon lives in the 2nd Ward in North Point neighborhood. He graduated with his law degree from St. Louis University in 2005, and he currently works as the attorney for St. Louis Public Schools, Mr. Steve Harmon. Okay, thank you all. I'll be working as the timekeeper for all of the candidates, so there'll be red, green, and yellow cards ahead of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We would like to start by going over some ground rules for the debate. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity to freely answer each of the candidates already had an opportunity to freely answer a pre-debate survey in lieu of an introduction. Each of the candidates will have a 1 minute to answer each question. Some questions will be posed specifically to a particular candidate or to a set of candidates. Other questions will be asked of all candidates. You will have 2 minutes each for closing statements, and there will be a 1 minute rebuttal anytime one of the candidates' names is mentioned. We're going to begin with round one.
Thank you. So round one is a response to our follow-up questions to the pre-surveys that you filled out. Each of the members in the audience received the answers to their pre-surveys, and you each will have 1 minute to answer, and we ask during this first round that when you will call your name beforehand that you make your way to the podium, okay?
The first question is for Mr. Harmon, and this is in follow-up to the question of how you understand crime and its causes. Would you step to the podium? Thank you. Mr. Harmon, you defined crime in your answer, but you did not address its causes. Can you do so now?
Well, the causes of crime vary depending on the person that commits the crime. So in order to determine what the cause is, I guess I would need a particular type of crime. But crime in general, the causes can vary. So unless without more specificity, that's a question I really can't answer.
Okay. I think we're looking for just a general sense of your understanding of some of the general causes of crime. But if you don't have a response to that,
okay.
we can move
The
on.
general causes of crime would be lack of opportunities for individuals, lack of resources, person's personal desires and wants, and so on and so forth, would be the causes generally for crime.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Gardner, and this is in response to the same question. You indicated that you would like to take the opportunity today to detail your view on the causes of crime. Can you please elaborate?
As you heard, the causes of crime, as you heard, can vary. So we all know that education fuels crime. Lack of education fuels crime, as well as economically depressed areas fuel crime, as well as lack of employment fuels crime. But actually the culture and the violence in which an individual lives at also fuels crime, because what you understand about crime, there are systemic issues of unemployment, lack of opportunity, lack of health access, lack of viable businesses in their community. But at the same time, it's hopelessness that we know that young people who are going into the criminal justice system face, because there's lack of mental health services and lack of opportunity. So that's the overview of what crime and the root causes of crime. Excuse me.
Thank you. Mr. Hamacher, you provided some examples in your response of proud moments and success stories in your career. Can you explain what those examples reveal about your understandings of what causes crime?
Sure. I'll begin by thanking the audience and for the organizations that put this together. As you stated in my opening, I'm a prosecutor in the office now. I handle murder cases, robberies, assaults, and I'm proud of the convictions I've gotten on those cases. But also some of the things that I'm most proud about is getting people out of the criminal justice system, defendants. And I think that's actually the big difference between myself and the other candidates. I'm the only candidate for circuit attorney who, as a prosecutor, has successfully diverted nonviolent individuals out of the criminal justice system. Whether it was the 17-year-old African-American male who was stopped up in North City with a concealed firearm, who through a diversion program I put together, he's now a successful college student working 2 summer jobs now this summer, or more recently, the adult female who was battling mental health issues that I recently diverted out of the criminal justice system. That's always been my philosophy of what a prosecutor should be doing, is not just locking up everyone, but trying to figure out ways where we can get people out of the criminal justice system.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Carl, you listed poverty, a gun culture, addiction, mental illness, and lack of opportunity as some examples of things that lead to crime. Do you believe the circuit attorney has a role in addressing these underlying causes? If so, what is that role?
I do think the causes of crime are complex, and those are just a number of things that I said lead us to be in the situation of having this kind of crime rate, because people have a lack of opportunity, because people have a lack of access to education, because of mental health issues, because of addiction. And I do believe that the circuit attorney needs to take a forefront in addressing those problems. I think as a citizen, the circuit attorney wants to have a role in fixing those problems. The circuit attorney wants justice, and often justice is not a criminal conviction for somebody. Justice is about living in peace. Justice is about every neighborhood having the same opportunity as another neighborhood. So we talk about justice in the courtroom, but the circuit attorney has a role in justice everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we asked each of you to compare and contrast yourself to the current circuit attorney, Jennifer Joyce. This question is for you, Ms. Gardner. What did you mean in your response when you said, by the new reality of criminal prosecution in a post-Ferguson era?
Well, as I stated before, we talk about what happened after Ferguson. We heard many people say we have to do something different. So Jennifer Joyce, I respect her office, but at the same time, the challenges of yesteryear are not for the challenges going forward. And the challenges going forward is about building trust in the community. And I heard one of my opponents talk about that they're the only person that talks about diversion, but I'm the only candidate up here who actually has addressed legislation to deal with criminal justice reform in terms of moving that office forward on the legislative level, in terms of how we reduce mass incarceration, how we prevent serious and violent crime, how we prevent the recidivism rate. So when you talk about how we move forward, that is building trust, and I'm the only candidate on this stage who's able to do that with my broad, unique experiences. So, thank you.
Thank you. Another question we asked in the pre-survey was, if you were unable to continue in the race, who would you vote for? This question is for you, Ms. Carl. You were the only candidate that directly answered the question, stating Patrick Hamacher, because although he has only tried a single homicide, he is the only other candidate besides my decade of homicide experience who has handled a violent felony. Can you explain that? And then we're going to allow Mr. Harmon and Representative Gardner to respond to that comment.
Sure. I'm surprised I'm the only one that answered the question asked, because I think that everyone up here is a very nice person, and I think everyone up here wants the best for our fine city. But when it comes right down to it, we have to have experience in this job. At 188 homicides last year and on the track of that many homicides this year, we have to have someone in this role that has experience in looking at violent crime and tackling violent crime. And so I have a 13-year track record of standing up for victims in court. I have a 13-year track record of experience in this office, of managerial experience, of not only am I, but I oversee the homicide unit. So when I went to look at that question, I thought, well, who's the next most experienced person? And Patrick has, in fact, tried and he's handled a couple homicides, and he has, in fact, tried one. So at least he's walked in and knows what it's like to handle a homicide case in our office.
Mr. Harmon, would you like to respond to that comment?
Certainly. My response to that question was that I was solely focused on my own campaign and that I have not examined the qualifications or the characteristics of my opponents or how well that they might do in that office. I believe I'm the best qualified candidate for that office. I'm the only candidate in this race that has actual supervisory and managerial experience, not that I was just promoted at the time I was announced that I would be running for this race. I'm a former homicide detective. I was a police officer for over 21 years. I've investigated more homicides than that office has ever prosecuted. At the time I was a homicide detective, we had over 300 homicides in a single year. I was a supervisor with the St. Louis Police Department as well as a commander where I managed multiple detective bureaus at the same time. I've handled budgets, transfers, hires, promotions, and so on. So I'm the only candidate with managerial and administrative experience. Thank you.
And Ms. Gardner, why do you feel that you are capable of doing the job of circuit attorney without having prosecuted a single felony?
Well, first of all, that's a mistake. I have prosecuted felonies. I was a prosecutor with the city of St. Louis. But as we heard, we talk about the type of case you prosecuted. I feel like we're all adequate to try cases. And as a person in the circuit attorney's office who's worked my way from a misdemeanors to the grand jury to the felony trial staff, as well as practice law in a diverse setting, not just in the prosecutor's view, for over 13 years, and as well as being a legislator and as a registered nurse, I understand that we have to look at this office moving it forward in a very unique way for the new types of challenges. So when you talk about this career prosecutor rhetoric of the type of case you try, that's what we've been using for decades, and we still have 180 murders, and most of those murders are unsolved. We still have the lack of trust in the whole system, and trust is still spreading. So when you talk about experience, I would love experience from a variety of resources, as well as being able to manage a district of over 34,000 people and managing a budget of the whole state of Missouri. So I think I have a variety of experiences that sets me apart from everybody else on this stage.
You were also asked in the pre-debate survey whether you support the use of a special prosecutor, and if so, in what situations. Mr. Harmon, can you give one specific example of the type of case that may call for a special prosecutor?
A particular case that may cause, in my opinion, the use of a special prosecutor would be that type of case that would tend to bring distrust or lack of credibility to the investigation as well as the judicial process. So as far as a particular crime, no, I cannot give an example. I would be one of those things that I would know it when I see it. Yes. Pardon me?
Ms. Carl? Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Ms. Carl, in his response, Mr. Hamacher stated that he supports a special prosecutor in part because of the close working relationship between police and prosecutors. You've also worked closely with the police for years as a member of the Circuit Attorney's Office. Haven't you also developed a close working relationship with police, and how could you be unbiased in officer-involved shooting cases given this close relationship?
So there are times that I definitely think a special prosecutor is appropriate. What I've stopped short of saying is that in every single case I will appoint a special prosecutor. One of the reasons I feel that way is we haven't defined what a special prosecutor is, and we haven't determined a way to hold a special prosecutor accountable to the public, which is very, very key. Because what happens when someone appoints a special prosecutor, they don't do a very good job, they don't see the job through, and we have no way to have recourse against that action. So I understand, I get that there are circumstances that definitely need to call for a special prosecutor, and I'll examine each individual case. I do have a relationship with the police department. I'm endorsed by the St. Louis Police Association. And I think that there are many officers that do a great job. But I've also prosecuted an officer. I've gone into court and asked a jury to find an officer guilty. So I know that I can do the job. But if I've worked in a unit with that officer, if I've put that officer on the witness stand, if there's any part of me that's had a career overlap with that officer, I'm willing to give it a special prosecutor.
Thank you.
We asked, do you feel that mass incarceration is a problem in St. Louis? Mr. Hamacher, I would like clarification from you. You provided some strategies for reducing the prison population, but do you believe that the current level of incarceration is a problem?
Sure. I was wondering when I was going to get another question. Yeah, of course, mass incarceration is a problem not only here in the city of St. Louis, but also throughout the country. You know, right now, the Missouri Department of Corrections is the #1 mental health facility in the state of Missouri. That is a problem. It costs about $23,000 a year to lock up someone at the Missouri Department of Corrections. It costs about $7,000 to send an individual to a drug court program. Also, when you're looking at things like the recidivism rate, 7 out of 10 individuals who go to the Missouri Department of Corrections return. If you send them into a drug court program, you're looking at a recidivism rate of 3 out of 10 individuals will end up at the Missouri Department of Corrections. So you're flipping that switch. I think that where we can, with people dealing with mental health issues, drug addiction issues, veterans, and nonviolent offenders, we have to look towards ways of alternatives to incarcerations and making sure that we're providing them resources so that they don't come out and reoffend.
Another question on our survey asked you to address the problem of individuals sitting in jail for long periods of time pre-trial because they cannot afford to post bond. Ms. Gardner, it's not uncommon for people to sit in jail for months without having been convicted of anything because they are unable to post a bond set by the court. In such situations, guilty pleas entered to secure release from confinement can compromise the integrity of the search for justice. For individuals awaiting trial, how long is too long, and how would you address this potential threat to the justice system?
That's a very good question. First of all, I believe that we have to, one, as a prosecutor's office, pursue justice. And how we pursue justice is making the process fair, even for the defendants. So in order to make it fair, I believe and support a judge's individual discretion to give people reasonable bonds. You know, I know we had a discussion in terms of where we give no bonds in certain types of cases. You know, I support the right to fair bonds because we need to be expeditiously in the criminal justice field for us to pursue justice on behalf of the people of the city of St. Louis. So I can't give you a time frame of this person should be held for this period of time, but I think that we should look at each individual cases and actually make recommendations for a reasonable bond due to the fact that we have to look at that individual's priors, the type of case they're charged with, and the individual situation. So I support reasonable bonds, but at the same time, we can pursue justice also and advocate for victims of the city of St. Louis.
Thank you. So we also asked, do you support the death penalty and when? Mr. Harmon, you stated that you would reserve the death penalty for the most egregious cases where the facts of the case are not in dispute. What did you mean by the facts not being in dispute? Does this only apply to cases in which the defendant has pled guilty?
Certainly not. I think what I meant when I said when the facts are not in dispute, that all of the evidence overwhelmingly supports the conviction. And when I meant by most egregious cases, we've witnessed a wave of crime that's been unprecedented with all of these homicides. Some of them are more egregious than others. For example, the case of Brandy Hill that occurred approximately 3 weeks ago over here on Washington and 11th Street, where during the carjacking where she was shot in the head and thrown out of her car with her infant daughter in the back seat, and then her passenger was thrown out of the car. An hour later, they set the car on fire. I mean, I don't understand those types of crimes, but that's what I mean by most egregious offenses, when the facts are not in dispute.
Ms. Carl, what do you mean when you say that you would examine an implicit bias in making your decision with regard to the death penalty?
I think that to be transparent, to be accountable to ourselves and to the community, we need to make sure that we are even-handedly applying all sentencing, and that would include the death penalty. So I believe that our office should track what the race of a defendant and what the race of the victim is every single time we hand out a sentencing, and that includes the death penalty. I think that you have to have your own self-check system, and then I think the public has a right to know. So I think that by doing that check, then we'll be able to see, are we handing out, is the death penalty something that we're recommending because of certain factors that we believe that we have an implicit bias on? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hamacher, you're up again. If you do not believe that the death penalty is a deterrent to gun violence or other violent crimes, what makes you support it in rare circumstances?
Right. Okay. So I do support the death penalty in rare circumstances. I have concerns that I'm sure a lot of us have in regards to the death penalty. I have concerns over some of the controversies of the drugs that we use to execute individuals, over the costs that it takes while people are waiting to go through the process, and the fact that we now know that we have executed innocent individuals. At the same time, we are experiencing a level of violent crime here in the last 2 years that we haven't seen for 20 years in regards to the homicide rate. And, through my experience, I prosecuted some very violent individuals. So I'm not going to say exactly when I'm going to use it. I just can't, I'm not comfortable taking it off the table as of yet.
You were also asked about your relationships with police unions in this city and the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Mr. Harmon, you stated that and I quote, "The police unions have endorsed other candidates that they believe will be partial to the police officers accused of crimes," end quote. Who were you referring to, and what was the basis for your statement?
Well, I did not receive endorsement by the St. Louis Police Officers Association. I believe another candidate did who actually stated that she received it. That was Mary Pat Carl. Nor did I receive an endorsement by the Ethical Society of Police. I did receive an endorsement from the retired police officers. As a police commander 10 years ago, I witnessed a St. Louis police officer abusing a prisoner. I reported that. Within an hour of me reporting it, he was suspended. Within 2 months of that, he was fired. Because of that, I don't enjoy the support of the police unions here in St. Louis.
Okay, but to be clear, what makes you state that those organizations believe these other candidates will be partial to them?
Probably because of the relationship that they have with the police. She's currently an attorney with the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, and I know that office does have, at present, a good relationship with the St. Louis Police.
Thank you. Mr. Hamacher, would you like a chance to respond?
Sure. You know, I was endorsed by the Ethical Society of Police Officers, and for those who don't know, that's the African American Police Association. Obviously, I'm running against 2 other African Americans, including a former police officer. And I think the fact that, you know, frankly, they backed the bald white guy in this race, I think is a good signal that I'm someone who can bring people together and bridge that race gap that we have here in the St. Louis. You know, I have support from rank and file police officers, and I appreciate that support. You know, we have to rely on them to do their jobs every day in order for us to do our jobs. So, you know, I enjoy that support. At the same time, you know, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be, you know, somehow a puppet for the police department. I also enjoy the support from, you know, people on the activist side as well. And I think that's what we're looking for from the next circuit attorney, is someone that is going to have that kind of balance and can bring that kind of people together. And so I'm really proud of that.
Ms. Carl, would you like to respond to Mr. Harmon?
Every single candidate up here sought the endorsement of the St. Louis Police Officers Association. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to assume that someone was picked for endorsement because that they were going to follow exactly what the Police Officers Association is going to do. If that were the case, why did that person show up at their doorstep and ask for their endorsement? Was that their understanding that was the cost of that endorsement? Because it was not mine. It was never conveyed to me that that was the expectation. In the end, the Police Officers Association endorsed me because they know what it takes to do the job. They know the tough decisions that come across the circuit attorney's desk. And they know that it takes experience. It takes knowing those cases. It takes knowing the intricacies of the criminal justice system. It takes having worked in them for a long time and to bring justice and to make sure that you're prosecuting the right people for the right crimes. And that's why I earned their endorsement.
Mr. Hamacher, I have a follow-up question. The same minority police union that endorsed you also called for the resignation of Chief Dotson. As candidates are often politically aligned with those who endorse them, do you support the call for Chief Dotson's resignation?
You know, good question, because it's tough, right? I recognize that the next circuit attorney, we're going to have to work with Chief Dotson or any other chief. I am looking forward to working with a chief who supports my vision for the office and for the city of St. Louis. And what I want to bring effectively and implement here in the city of St. Louis is a crime strategies program called Focus Deterrence. And what this program does is you focus on the violent individuals, you hold them accountable, and then you additionally defer susceptible individuals away from criminal activity. You do that by building coalitions with relevant stakeholders to provide resources, mental health resources, drug addiction resources, job resources, educational resources, to make sure you get people out of the criminal justice system. So I'm willing to work with any chief who is going to help me bring that here to the city of St. Louis. When it's been effectively implemented, not only do you see dramatic reductions in violent crime, but you also see a better buildup of trust between communities and law enforcement.
Thank you. So very simply, yes or no, do you support the call for Chief Dotson's resignation?
I can't answer that because I'm going to have to work with him regardless, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Hamacher.
You were asked the following on the pre-debate survey. Is using city resources to take nonviolent protest-related charges to trial a fiscally responsible decision? Ms. Carl, you were the only candidate that did not state an opposition to the prosecution of nonviolent protest-related charges. What purpose do you believe such prosecutions serve for the city?
The reason that I didn't give a blanket response is that I don't believe in giving any blanket responses to any criminal cases. I think that every case is different. I think that every case needs to be examined on its individual circumstances. I think part of the breakdown and problems in the criminal justice system right now are blanket statements, are treating every file the same. And what we have to acknowledge is that every file has a different person on it, has a different victim on it, and involves different circumstances. So I don't believe that we should be going to trial or prosecuting simply because somebody engaged in a peaceful, nonviolent protest. But I don't want to be faced down the line with an exception to the rule and have stood up here and promised everybody I would never do it, and there comes the exception across my desk. I believe in treating each case as it comes individually, and that's what my 13 years experience has taught me is wise to do.
Do you believe that there's been an over-prosecution of nonviolent protesters in the city of St. Louis?
I believe we can do better. I believe that not all of those nonviolent protests should have gotten as far as they did. And most of them were misdemeanors. A lot of them pled on the eve of trial. Some went to trial. I don't agree that all of them should have, no.
Thank you.
This is the final question for the first section. So the last question was asking you, would you choose between Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, We Must Stop Killing Each Other, and Rather Not Say? 3 of you, Ms. Gardner, Mr. Hamacher, and Ms. Carl, chose Black Lives Matter, while Mr. Harmon chose All Lives Matter. Please explain what that phrase means to you. We'll start with Ms. Carl and work over to Mr. Harmon. Also, you have 1 minute. Please respect the red paper.
What that means to me is an acknowledgement that though all lives matter, that at some point we have to acknowledge that some lives right now are being treated differently than another, and they need our concentration on making sure that everything is fair, that making sure that we are valuing all lives as a society. So though it is true that all lives matter, right now we need to concentrate that Black lives matter because they're not mattering enough.
First of all, of course, Black Lives Matter. I like to say I live a Black life, so I understand the issues in terms of how, African Americans are treated within the criminal justice system. That does not take away from any other people's lives, but we need to understand 1 in 3 African Americans are arrested, stopped, and charged and put in the system, as well as they're over-incarcerated in the criminal justice system, as well as they are targeted and stopped unlawfully. And so when we talk about criminal justice issues, most of the prison population look like me. So Black Lives Matters, but you all matter. Your civil liberties matter. Your life matters. And I think we need to do a better job as the prosecutor going forward to address those issues.
To me, the Black Lives Matter, to me that stands for a movement. Something that was maybe not at the forefront of people's minds prior to Ferguson when we're talking about some of these issues in the criminal justice system. And I think it stands for a movement that, of course, Black Lives Matter. That when we're talking about these issues of officer-involved shooting cases, I'm the only candidate who's worked on one of those cases. And after working through those cases, it's my opinion that there is a conflict of interest in those kind of cases, and I'd call for a special prosecutor. So it's kind of addressing some of these distrust issues that we have here in the criminal justice system, and as whole, understanding that. So to me, that's what it stands for as a movement.
I answered All Lives Matter because I was raised in a Christian household. As a former St. Louis police officer that policed all over this city, I've treated all people the same, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their background, where they lived, their sexual orientation. I believe that everyone's life is equal and all lives matter.
Thank you. That marks the end of round one. In round two, we have a series of questions that are going to be presented by representatives of our partner organizations.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Robertson with Metropolitan Congregations United Break the Pipeline campaign. How are you? As you know, the phrase school to prison pipeline refers to the process by which many young people, and especially young people of color in low-income communities, are subject to discipline and criminalized at an early age, resulting in their eventual incarceration as adults. What is the circuit attorney's role in bringing an end to the school to prison pipeline?
And this is a question for Ms. Carl and Ms. Gardner.
We have a role. When we see most people, that's because they're entering the criminal justice system, and that's our moment to intervene. So,
Lift up your mic some more, please.
it's supposed to go up? It's up as far as I can go. Thanks. I am loud. I probably could have handled it. So as circuit attorney, when we see people, or when they've entered the criminal justice system, and so what I believe that we need to do is to figure out how at that moment are we going to change from having the traditional model of being that entered the pipeline, or divert and give that person resources and hope that that is the only moment that they that they touch the criminal justice system. So I believe in diversion programs. I believe in alternative sentencing programs. And I believe one of the ones that I am passionate about the most is restorative justice. Maybe it's the background I had in doing child abuse cases, and that the understanding that kids' brains work differently, but we have to acknowledge that a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid's brain doesn't work the same way as an adult. So we can't dispense punishment or have the same results of a criminal case that we would on a 30-year-old person.
Thank you, Ms. Carl.
Oh, I'm not done.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. From day one, my platform has been that we have to prevent and reduce crime. So that means, as a prosecutor, we have to use a tool to go inside these classrooms earlier, because when they get to the prosecutor's office, it's too late. So what I would do is work with, the superintendent, work with family members, key community stakeholders, because we have to prevent young people who are going into the criminal justice system and preventing them early in early childhood education, exposing them to different alternatives. But at the same time, we have to educate the St. Louis public schools that now, after Ferguson, they are addressing the suspensions. And I think that we talk about criminals are not born. Criminals are not born. They are basically made based on the situations in which they're placed. And so I have been passionate about closing the prison, the pipeline, and I would do that vigorously as the next prosecutor, but going to these schools and doing more than just talking, figuring out what we can do to give a family some kind of support inside the community, working with law enforcement, working with the courts, working with the whole system, because we have to prevent violent crime and start it early.
I have a quick follow-up question, and I'd like a brief yes or no response from all of the candidates. We can start with Mr. Harmon and move to the left. The City of Seattle recently passed a resolution endorsing the goal of 0% youth incarceration. Would you support such a goal for St. Louis?
Yes, I would support such a program on a case-by-case basis or in limited circumstances, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, I would also support that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Are you Justice?
I am. Hey, I'm Tara. I am one of the directors with Hands Up United. I'm reading this question on behalf of the Justice for Reggie Clemens campaign. So many individuals have been sentenced to lengthy prison sentences as a result of mandatory minimums. Some judges have gone on record stating that mandatory minimums have forced them to issue sentences that far exceed what they would otherwise believe to be appropriate for the crime. If state policymakers were to solicit your input on this issue, would you support repealing mandatory minimums in favor of judicial discretion?
Can I answer that?
This is a question for Mr. Harmon and Mr. Hamacher.
Just keep it on. He said yes.
All right, my turn. Here, I'll stand up. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When we talk about, usually when we're talking about mandatory minimums, it's through the federal government. You know, their court system generally has these mandatory minimums, especially when we're talking about some of these, you know, drug offenses. I mean, some of them are outrageous. I'm really not in favor of mandatory minimums. I think every case should be looked at as a case-by-case basis.
May I
Mr.
finish?
Harmon, yes.
Okay. As stated, yes. I think that the judges should have more discretion. I'm opposed to mandatory minimums. I think that a case is, each case should be dealt with separately, and each penalty should be applied based on that particular case, that particular defendant, and the crime that was charged.
William Waller with Arch City Defenders. This is for Mr. Harmon and Ms. Carl. Public officials have stated their intention to strictly enforce ordinance violations following the murder of Brandy Hill. These will overwhelmingly target the homeless and poor population. What are your thoughts on this approach to law enforcement and prosecution, and do you believe targeting poor people for being on the street is effective in solving serious violent crime?
You can clap. It's fine. That is for Mr. Harmon and Ms. Carl.
I do not think that that is the appropriate response or approach to dealing with crimes such as that nature. I mean, you're targeting individuals on a citywide or a particular area. I guess in this case it would be downtown, the homeless population. I don't think that's the appropriate response at all.
I know prosecution. We don't do ordinance violations in the circuit attorney's office. How I'm looking at it from an outsider view, I don't agree with it. I would listen to the chief. I would hear him out on his arguments because, again, I know what it's like to be in a courtroom. I know what it's like to prosecute a case. I've never been a police officer, and I don't pretend to have an expertise in policing. So I would hear the chief out. I would listen to his arguments. But looking as an outsider into ordinance violations and that method of policing, I'm skeptical that it would do anything for violent crime.
Hi, my name is Annie, and I'm a member and volunteer with Decarcerate STL, which is part of MORE. This question is directed to Ms. Gardner and Mr. Hamacher. Opponents of the cash bail system argue that it creates different systems of criminal justice based on an individual's wealth or poverty. If you are able to pay, you can purchase your freedom while the charges are pending. If not, you sit behind bars. Do you agree or disagree with this statement?
I agree with that statement. That's why I support fair and just bonds for everyone and give more judicial discretion, not based on a type of case, but individual circumstances. So I'm for fair and just bonds across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in favor of fair bonds. I mean, you know, one of the things that is an unfortunate reality in the criminal justice system is, you know, money does play a big part in it. So wherever we can have better bonds, you know, that are more just and, you know, that people who unfortunately come from, you know, some poverty backgrounds are able to be able to afford to do that. I think we need to look to see how we can make it more just.
I have another follow-up, yes or no, starting with Ms. Carl and moving right. Would you support the abolition of the cash bail system in St. Louis?
It's hard on a yes/no. Ultimately, probably yes.
I think, you know, if the people, the city of St. Louis, say they want to get rid of it, I support it. But I think we have to also look at how we use those fees in terms of making the court go forward. So in terms of victim compensation funds, certain types of, you know, programs that we use through the bails to make the whole system work. I'm not for just giving people a cash bond just if they can't afford it, but we have to also look at, one, if that person can
Ms. Carl,
pay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gardner. Yes or no?
Oh, yes, I do support that if the people of the city of St. Louis are for that, so I do support that.
Thank you.
I kind of agree with Ms. Carl. Yes, ultimately, but I think that there's some things that we can do with the current system to reform it. But ultimately, I would tend to agree with yes, getting rid of that.
I would say yes, but in lieu of what? What are we going to use to replace that would be my question. So with just say yes as a blanket statement, I don't know. I would have to know what would we replace that with. But I would tend to agree with that.
Hi, I'm Christine Asafa with the Organization for Black Struggle, and my question is for Mr. Harmon and Ms. Gardner. Each year, the Attorney General releases a report on racial profiling on police and traffic stops. And given that oftentimes officer-involved shootings and allegations of police misconduct stem from pedestrian stops, as opposed to traffic stops, do you support a policy that would make the reporting more inclusive of everyday interactions between the community and police?
I can answer that. I'm for that as a state legislator before Ferguson. I'm for that now, and I'll support that as a prosecutor of the city of St. Louis.
Yes, as a former police officer, I certainly support that. I've been out there to see those interactions. I've personally had those interactions, and I think we should have more accountability. And I'm also a proponent of body cameras for police officers. I think that would cut down on a lot of the paperwork that causes police officers to have to account for those stops that they make that are reported to the Attorney General's office.
My name is Michelle Higgins. I'm with Faith for Justice. This question is for Mr. Hamacher and Ms. Carl. The current demographics of the Circuit Attorney's Office are this. There are 3 people of color who work as attorneys out of over 30 staff attorneys. As Circuit Attorney, what would a diverse office look like? And how would you go about recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce?
I'll go first. One of my plans, and I've brought it to Ms. Joyce, is to establish a better recruiting program. Not only do we need to recruit from our local law schools, but we need to get there early, when they're going through orientation, and explain that the job of a prosecutor is not just simply locking up individuals, that we can protect our victims at the same time, we can look at ways to get people out of the criminal justice system. So I have a plan that we're going to start here locally, and where I went to school at Mizzou. And if we have trouble recruiting here, then we need to expand, go regionally. You go up to Chicago, you got 5 law schools up there. And we can sell not only the office, but the city of St. Louis. I'll tell you, lots of people who graduate from law school, they have a lot of student loan debt, like myself. And the city of St. Louis is a very, very affordable place to live for an urban city. So you can sell them on that, but the experience level that we get in our office is bar none. If you're trying cases up in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Chicago, or even Nashville, it's going to take you about 3 years to really get in the courtroom and try cases. For better or worse, I tried my first case my 3rd week on the job. And that's the kind of things that we can sell.
You look right at the red paper and you just keep talking. I saw you look at it.
I had to finish that though.
I'm just letting you know I see that you see it, and you are not following the rules of the law of the space. Ms. Carr.
Thank you. There are 6 African American attorneys in the office. I believe that there are 8 attorneys of color in the office, which is about 10% of the office. It's a dismal number, I agree. 3% of the legal community nationwide are African Americans. 3%. So we don't just have a circuit attorney problem, though I acknowledge we have a circuit attorney problem. We have a national legal problem, and we need to come together as a legal community and look at what can we do better, because until we change that 3% number, I looked at Arch City Defenders, 16%. Nobody's better committed to the community than Arch City Defenders. I looked at the law firms, 5% in 2 ginormous St. Louis law firms. Those are dismal numbers. So we need to look at why aren't enough minorities attending law school and getting into the legal community. That's the first step to change, is to increase that 3%. Personally, as circuit attorney, what I will do is, we're decent at recruiting. We're decent. I'm not saying not tuning a horn too much. What we're really bad at is hanging on and promoting minorities in our office. So we need to have some tough conversations with people in our office and ask, what about this office environment are people not staying? And I don't pretend to have that answer, but I can tell you as circuit attorney, I'll get to the bottom of it.
Hello, my name is Philip Weeks, and I'm a volunteer and member of Decarcerate STL. This question is for Ms. Carroll and Mr. Harmon. The Supreme Court has ruled that anyone without a lawyer cannot be given a suspended sentence or jail time. Yet currently, in the city of St. Louis, defendants charged with misdemeanors routinely receive suspended sentences or time served, despite the fact that they are not provided counsel. As circuit attorney, will you commit to ensuring that people do not receive suspended sentences or jail time, including time served, if they are not afforded counsel?
Well, as circuit attorney, I like to follow the rules. So I can tell you that, yes, I would like to comply with court orders and rules. It's a question, though, that a circuit attorney has little power or control over. So often that is up to the judge and up to the public defender, whether they accept or reject, and whether or not a person will reach out and get an attorney. I will do what's in my power. I will do what I can.
Absolutely. When I was a prosecutor previously, any time that I would recommend jail or anything of that nature or high fines for a defendant, I would ensure that the defendant had an attorney, whether it was a court-appointed attorney or whether they had their own. I would never charge a defendant or go to court against a defendant without an attorney.
Hello, my name's Brianne Schubert, and I'm with St. John's United Church of Christ, beloved community. My question today is for Ms. Gardner and Mr. Hamacher. Many proposed gun control policies single out people with mental illness. Research and advocates suggest that people with mental health issues are more likely to be the victims of violence as opposed to the doers of violence. How do you respond? What, if any, types of gun control policies do you support?
Of course, I support reasonable gun policies, but in light of our state of Missouri, the legislators who are going to make it lax for any gun control, but we have to look at that individual's mental health issues and determine what's best suited for that individual and not put everyone in the system. So I'm for alternatives. At the same time, I'm for giving people mental health resources, but that's my experience as a legislator, at the same time as a registered nurse, to understand some people are going into the criminal justice system because of their mental illness. So we can't have this one-size-fits-all system, and that's why I want to create a partnership with many mental health experts and registered nurse and different people in the community so we can address that issue and find an alternative to just over-incarcerating people with mental health issues.
I'll be less than a minute this time, all right?
You better.
All right. In regards to gun control laws, I'm in favor of common sense gun control regulations. Things such as 24, 48-hour waiting periods, better background checks, especially to these automatic weapons that are too frequently out on our street. I'm in favor of banning those and in multi-purchase buys. In regards to mental health issues, I believe that we need to establish a mental health court here in the city of St. Louis. I know there's one judge who's working on that. As your next circuit attorney, I am committed to helping start that program, and I think that's going to get more individuals out of the criminal justice system to actually address the mental health issues that they have, freeing up more resources for me to focus on violent criminals.
Hi, I'm Reverend Starsky Wilson. I'm President and CEO of Deaconess Foundation and pastor of St. John's Church. I am most pleased and proud to stand with this coalition of very able and appropriate bodies to bring together this debate, and just want to say thank you to all the partners and those who did the hard work of pulling it together. I'm asking this question on behalf of Deaconess Foundation. Drug court fees sometimes prohibit defendants who might really benefit from drug court from participating. How will you address this problem? Also, how can drug court be expanded to serve more people? This question is for Mr. Hamacher and for Mr. Harmon.
Sure. Great question, Reverend. One of the things that I would differentiate myself with Ms. Joyce is that we do need to expand our drug court programs. You know, I was just talking to the drug commissioners the other day. There's 2 of them here in the city of St. Louis, and they said that they're at max capacity. But they said the reason that they're at max capacity is because they also took on a lot of people with mental health issues. And so again, back to what I was saying, we need to establish a mental health court. You know, that will allow more individuals into the drug court program. I went through the economics of drug court programs, the recidivism rate on the drug court programs, and it's just the right thing to do, to give these people another opportunity to come out and be productive members of society. It's also going to allow me, again, to have more resources to focus on violent offenders if we're getting people with drug addiction issues the help that they need.
I agree that the drug courts need to be expanded. We have 2 here. I think we should have at least 4. Also, people must recognize that whenever someone's sentenced to a diversion program, such as a drug court or anything else, there are numerous fees assessed with that. You have the fees for the court or for the program itself, along with other fees that are placed on the defendant. And it's almost handicapping someone before you even send them. So I would ask that the legislature look at maybe funding or providing more funding for the drug court and for other programs as well.
My name is Kathleen Heath. I'm here from Arch City Defenders, and my question is to Ms. Carl and Ms. Gardner. Given that criminal convictions can have a tremendous impact upon a poor or homeless person's access to civil needs, like housing or employment, do you believe that providing the impacted person with counsel in civil matters would help alleviate the collateral consequences of criminal convictions?
That's a very good question. That's a multi-layered question. First of all, as a prosecutor, we have to look at how we pursue a lot of these nonviolent offenses that we currently prosecute. So one of those issues in terms of when we put someone in the system, they're sentenced to an economic death sentence, and these are nonviolent people. So in terms of how we push forth policies, you know, this last year, we talked about a fake expungement bill that the prosecutor's office supported because it's about sealing instead of expunging their records. I'm the only former prosecutor that basically supports not putting people in the system and evaluating them on a case-by-case situation and understanding that we can't put everybody in the system because they're having an economic death sentence. So I support fair representation on the criminal justice side as a prosecutor. At the same time, I'm for helping people get their lives back on track because right now they can't get any resources. They can't even go to school with a drug possession case right now. So I'm for that.
The point of a diversion program, the point of alternative sentencing programs that I support is in fact to keep people from having that conviction hang over their heads and keep them from opportunity. Some of other people have mentioned it's cost effective for everyone. It also, in diversion programs, puts thousands of hours of community service. So it's better for everybody for people to participate in diversion. And so a diversion will allow somebody to start a job, an opportunity, all without that criminal conviction. But if there are circumstances, they don't want to participate in diversion, maybe it's a violent offense and that they do a number of years. What we need to recognize as a society that when we sentence somebody and they complete their sentence, they're square with the house. They have completed what we've asked them. If we thought that they should pay for it for the rest of their lives, then that's what we would have recommended, right? So if we're saying X amount of years is the punishment for what you did, then we need to set them up to get reintegrated in society the best way possible after they've completed their sentence, because they're square.
Good afternoon. My name is Jared Boyd, and I have the pleasure of asking a question on behalf of the Epsilon Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Reverend Wilson asked a question that is similar in nature to our question, so I will do my best to try and amend the question and make it relevant. Oftentimes, diversionary programs are excluded from nonviolent offenders who would need them the most. Name one diversion program other than the drug court, which you just alluded to in your last answer. Name one diversion program other than the drug court in the circuit attorney's office that you believe is particularly effective, and another program that you would change as circuit attorney. And those questions are for Mr. Hamacher and Mr. Harmon.
So currently our office also has a gun diversion program. Started about 6 months ago, and this is for nonviolent gun offenders. I think it's a good program. I think it's long overdue, and I think we should have been looking at these kind of programs about 10, 15 years ago. And one of the things that I talked about that I think is the key difference between myself and the other candidates is that I'm the only prosecutor who's actually diverted nonviolent offenders. And I talk about this one case that I had a lot, where I had a 17-year-old individual who was stopped up in North City with a concealed firearm on him. And if we continue to take the same approaches that our office was taking and that the court system was taking, he was going to be expelled from the high school that he was in. Instead, I put together a program before our office had a program in which he would be on probation to me. I check in with him every 2 weeks, make sure he stays away from guns and gangs, gets good grades, and graduates. And now I can tell you, as I said earlier, he successfully went through that program, he graduated from high school, and now he's back this summer working 2 summer jobs.
He went over time. I was distracted. I'm sorry.
Okay.
She accidentally flipped the sign to red. I backed away. So.
Okay. The programs that Mr. Hamacher just spoke about, the gun program, that's still relatively new. I don't think there is any data in to suggest whether it's a success or not. I think that the other program that you mentioned, Mr. Boyd, the drug court, I think that's very successful. As circuit attorney, a program that I would implement would be to provide services and resources to those people that are arrested and for whatever reason are not prosecuted. Currently under state statute in Missouri, if you're arrested, the circuit attorney or the prosecutor has 24 hours to charge an individual. Oftentimes that person is not charged, and it could be for various reasons. So as circuit attorney, I would have an office set up in the court building, so when those cell doors open and an individual walks out, we could provide whatever services we could get for them, whether it's drug treatment, education, or any other services to keep them from going back and reoffending and getting rearrested over and over and over again. Just because doing the same thing that we've always done is not working.
Hello, my name is Margaret Phillips. I'm with Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. This is a question addressed to Ms. Gardner and Mr. Harmon. Studies have shown that the death penalty is far more likely to be used in situations involving a black defendant and a white victim than in any other scenario. Given this reality, how can the death penalty ever be considered a fair punishment?
That's a very good question. Personally, I am against the death penalty, but as the prosecutor, you have to follow the laws of the state of Missouri. So my personal opinion is it does not matter. But what I will do is I take into consideration those factors, that over 85% of the murder cases, they are against African Americans who have white victims. And we have to do a better job to put safeguards. And I will work with legislators. I will work with the people of the city of St. Louis, and we should discuss whether it's a deterrent or not. And we should make sure that we have this issue put out whether we should get rid of the death penalty, which as a legislator, I supported getting rid of the death penalty. So I know as a prosecutor, I have to prosecute death penalty cases, but I will look at the age, I will look at the circumstances, I will look at the mental health illness of that individual. I will look at the type of egregious and crime. So, and I'll also look at how we recommend and when we recommend that, and be accountable and transparent to the public in terms of when we put forth death penalty cases or we issue a death penalty case.
As I stated in my pre-debate questionnaire, I do not believe that the death penalty is a deterrent. Having said that, I also said that I would reserve that for the most egregious cases where the facts are not in dispute. I would look at the circumstances that you alluded to in your question regarding race of the defendant as well as the victim and other circumstances. They would all be taken into account. It would not be something that I would just arbitrarily use. I would reserve that for the most egregious cases, like I stated, when the facts are not in dispute, where there's absolutely no question and it's beyond a reasonable doubt. We have overwhelming evidence, whether it's on video or what have you, but I would reserve that for the most egregious cases where the facts are not in dispute.
Jeanette Mott Oxford with Empower Missouri. We too would like to thank Decarcerate and More for putting on this great program. It's refreshing to be at an event like this that's so issue-driven instead of circus, like so much of politics is just now. This question is for Ms. Carl and Ms. Gardner. State statutes mandate that prison guards report any abuse they see in prisons. This statute does not apply to jail guards. Would you support mandatory reporting of abuse for jailers?
Of course I would. I mean, I think that we talk about being accountable and building trust in the whole system, then they should also be subject to mandatory reporting of those egregious that happens inside those prisons. So I do support that.
As someone who spent a better part of my career in special victims cases of seeing what happens when people are vulnerable and how difficult it is to come forward. I did those child abuse, child sex abuse cases, and I was reliant upon teachers who were willing to report those crimes. I would absolutely support mandatory reporting of people who are in vulnerable positions.
I'm John Chasnoff with the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, and this question is for Mr. Hamacher and Ms. Carl. It has to do with Garrity statements, which are the statements given by police officers to internal affairs. They're required when the officer is part of an investigation. And because they're required, those statements can't be used against an officer in a court of law, but they are integral to investigations. But currently, the police department does not turn the Garrity statements over to the circuit attorney's office. And one judge recently said that this was a probable Brady violation, inappropriate withholding of evidence. So as circuit attorney, would you press for your right to see those Garrity statements?
Great question. Yeah, and I believe that there is some ongoing litigation in resolving this issue. I do believe that, based on the case law, that those statements are something that need to be turned over, and so I'd be looking for them to turn them over to me as the next circuit attorney.
I do believe that it is in current litigation, and so I'm hopeful that the courts will solve the issue. Because I do believe it's an important question. As a prosecutor, I believe that when you are going to prosecute a case, you need to have all the information you can available to you. It's important. It's important to protect the rights of the defendant. It's important to your case. So I support anything that allows the prosecutor to get all the information.
How you doing? My name's Tef Poe, director from Hands Up United. I have my question on my phone, so I'm letting technology load it up. In most cases, people in your situation have intense relationships with the police unions and other political offices as well. And the concerns of the people, honestly, quite frankly, doesn't really matter once you guys get elected, because those relationships delegate how you actually do your job. So for the most of this is just a game of charades until one of you is actually elected. And my question would be, since we know that this is how politics is delegated in Missouri, specifically with high-ranking officials, we see it every day with Jennifer Joyce and people like our beloved county executive who take relationships and run rapid with them. What are you going to do about that once you're in office? What assurance do we have that you're just not posing for the camera and gesturing for the public right now?
And this final question in round 2 is for all 4 candidates.
We'll start with you, Ms. Carl.
Well, I hope that my 13 years and a passion for being a prosecutor comes through, and then my sincerity, because I've done this work for 13 years and committed myself for standing up to victims for 13 years. And I've been involved in the community since the day that I set foot in that office back in 2003 as the liaison to Gravois Park. So community work has always been important to me, and relationships in the community were important to me straight out of law school. What one is that I'm not the politician in this race. I'm a prosecutor. I have no desire to run for another office, and I'm running for this office because I believe that experience matters.
This is a very good question. I guess I'm the politician in the race because I'm currently a state representative. But as you said, I've been accountable to the people of the city of St. Louis, representing state representative of the 77th district. And when you talk about how we change this office, it's not about Kim Gardner, the candidate, it's about the people of the city of St. Louis. And we have to build trust. You hear people talk about diversion, they're about alternatives. It sounds really good. But I'm the only one up here who actually has an actual record. From day one, starting in 2008, when I ran against one of the strongest opponents that anybody can face, is Jamila Nasheed. When I ran because I was a prosecutor who saw young people going into the system and they're dropping out before the 5th and 3rd grade, and I'm saying we have to do more than just prosecute, we have to be about community. So I lived 40 years in North City, where I see the devastating destruction of violent crime that plagues my community, and I walk there every day. I don't have a sympathy story, I'm actually empathetic and live around people who are faced with criminal justice challenge day in and day out, regardless of whether I'm state representative of the 77th district. So I'm about the people of the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, I wanted to be a prosecutor when I was about 14, 15 years old. I used to love those shows like Dateline and 2020. I used to watch them with my mom. And I always just thought the prosecutors on those shows had a really important job. It was really interesting. So everything I've done since college, I interned at the prosecuting attorney's office up in Chicago. I went to law school with the sole purpose of becoming a prosecutor, and then this has been the only job I've ever had. I've never been involved in politics before. I love this job. I also know that our city has some really, really big challenges before us. You know, we're dealing with a violent crime problem and a big distrust in the criminal justice system. And while I think these challenges are big, I don't think we can continue to do the same things over and over with the same people over and over and expect different results. So the reason that I decided to run for circuit attorney is because, yes, I do have that experience going after the most violent individuals, but I had the experience also diverting nonviolent individuals out of the criminal justice system. And I think it's that two-pronged approach that we need from our next circuit attorney to really build trust back into this system and hold violent offenders accountable.
I've been in public employment my entire career with over 20 years as a St. Louis police officer. Very, very, very integrity-oriented. I'm an outsider in this race. I'm not a politician. I'm also a former prosecutor. Like I said, my whole adult career has been in public service. I'm currently an attorney with the St. Louis Public Schools. I'm running for circuit attorney because I see a need for change in this city with the crime, with the poverty, with the resources or lack thereof resources. And we keep doing, like Patrick Hamacher just said, the same things over and over and over again, and it's not working. I intend to make a change in that office. And to the question, my office will be accessible, it'll be open, and you can challenge me on anything that I've said that I would do as circuit attorney. You can always come and talk to me. I will be there. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the second round of questions. We'd like to thank all of our partnering organizations for presenting those questions. Please give them a round of applause.
So the last portion of the debate today, we're going to have to shorten because the last section went over time a little bit. It did not? Oh, okay, excuse me, never mind. So we're going to ask all the questions, and I want to lift up that there was an RSVP link available to the public who wanted to register for this event, and in that form, you were asked to submit any questions that you wanted to ask the candidates, and so we've tried very hard. We got over 60 questions, so thank you for that. We try very hard to integrate all of those questions into the things that have been asked so far. And the questions that I will be asking are questions that were so good that they needed to stand alone. And Blake will be asking questions specifically around racial disparities within the criminal justice system. You will also have time to talk to any of the candidates directly after this is over. They will stay. I'm sure that they're going to stay around because they're politicians and they want to meet you. So if you have any questions that you want to ask them, please feel free to do so once this is concluded.
Sure, yes. Let's start with one of the questions on racial disparity. So the criminal justice system, actually this is a statement. The criminal justice system creates and exacerbates racial disparity in the city of St. Louis. Please state whether you agree or disagree with this statement and why. And this is for all 4 candidates. So let's mix it up, and we'll start with Mr. Hamacher, and we'll move to the right.
Excuse me. So sorry.
The statement, I will repeat it, is the criminal justice system creates and exacerbates racial disparity in the city of St. Louis.
I think you see racial disparity in the whole criminal justice system in the whole country. You know, I think that, yes, so yes, I would agree with that.
And why, please?
And why?
Yes.
You know, that's a complex question. You know, I think it goes to some of the root causes of crime. You know, I grew up in Brentwood. I grew up in a stable family. I had educational opportunities. My parents really pushed me to go to college. I understand that a lot of people didn't have those same opportunities here in the city of St. Louis. You know, when I was up in Chicago in college, you know, interning at the prosecuting attorney's office, I also was tutoring kids out of the Cabrini Green Housing Project. And for those who don't know, that's a lot like Pruitt-Igoe, but even worse. And what I saw from these kids, their backgrounds, you know, they come from broken homes, they had parents that didn't have those same opportunities. That really leads to some of these causes of crime. And so, you know, whether it's your race or your economic backgrounds, I think it all goes back to these opportunities.
Mr. Harmon?
Before anyone can actually enter into the criminal justice process, it starts with the police. Before they can be prosecuted by the circuit attorney's office, or before they can be sentenced to incarceration or pay a fine by a judge, they have to be arrested. So I know what the racial disparities look like as far as policing. Like I said, I was a police officer here for over 20 years. I worked in every district in this city, all 9 districts, and I've seen some of the things that police officers do, and I told you a story about how I reported a police officer for misconduct. So I think that's where everything starts at. So I think we need to do our policing differently than it has been in the past.
Ms. Carl?
Because if we look at one of the causes, if we look at let's take, for example, drug treatment or addiction issues. We know that as a country and as St. Louis, that addiction issues are affecting some neighborhoods and some races more than they are affecting others. So then those enter the criminal justice system, and we're treating them the same. And so I think that's how it exacerbates the problem. So one of the ways that we can counter that, we stop treating addiction the same across the board. We have to look at treating people, and then we can fix the problem. So that's why I support treatment courts, because there's nothing that, I shouldn't say nothing. The circuit attorney has a very limited role to step back. They can be a leader in the community. They can speak out about the problems that lead someone down the path to the criminal justice system. That has a place. But the greatest control you have is the moment they step into the criminal justice system. So how can you right that wrong? And that is, you can treat addicts differently than other types of crimes.
Understand that 1 in 3 African Americans are charged, arrested, and stopped in the state of Missouri. We also know that we are 12% of the population and over 85% of the prison population across the country. So we understand that as a prosecutor, you need the tools to, 1, prosecute, but at the same time, build trust in the community so we can prevent those disparities to continue to happen. So as the next prosecutor, I will work with my broad, unique experience to understand a broken education system. At the same time, I will also understand the real mental and health issues that why young people go into the system. So for us to say is we're limited in our resources and what a prosecutor can do, the new prosecutor for going forward in the future has to be a community leader and a great unifier to address these complex issues of racial inequity inside those courtrooms. And at the same time, we have to look at less than 1% of all elected prosecutors are minority. That's a problem. So many young people are cut from opportunities so they can be a lawyer, so they can be a prosecutor, and I will address that.
At the most recent meeting of the 22nd Ward in North St. Louis City, candidate Carl stated that the reason there has been a tremendous political and media reaction to the tragic murder on Washington Avenue versus the everyday nightmare of crime on the north side was that people in the Washington Avenue district, quote, make noise. This was not well received by those in attendance, nor did she make matters better when she used the phrase, "the squeaky wheel gets the oil." I'm wondering, if Ms. Carl truly believes the residents of the North Side don't care or speak out against the violence in their communities, and whether or not she believes there is a historical systematic ignorance or taking for granted North Side crime that has never been the case in more well-to-do areas of the city. Ms. Carl, I will give you the opportunity to address this question, and I will have a follow-up question for the rest of you.
I'm glad I'm getting the opportunity to address this question, and I know where the question came from because it's been my one person on Twitter. That is not what I said. It's not how I responded to that question. It actually was a conversation between the moderator and somebody in the audience. That was not my answer to why I believed that the attention of Washington Avenue was getting, that crime downtown was getting more attention. I said I believe that people the greater community stands up and takes notice when it's happening downtown, and that frustrated me. And what I stated then and what I'll state now is that has been frustrating me for a while. I was the prosecutor on the death of Anaya Cook. Anaya Cook was killed 15 days before she was supposed to leave for college. And at the same time period, Megan Boken was killed in the Central West End. And I was livid as a prosecutor because I had Anaya's file on my desk and a colleague had Megan's file on her desk. And that file, I knew, got more resources from the community and from the police department in my office, and I'm still to this day angry about it.
Follow up, and we'll start with you, Ms. Gardner, and move down. Do you agree that certain communities in St. Louis get more public attention and response in terms of public safety concerns? If so, what is your view on why this is the case?
Well, as I said, one thing that we always look at how media reports certain issues. So I think all crime throughout the whole city of St. Louis is important, no matter where it's at. But at the same time, we have to look at, how people want to implement this one-size-fits-all. We talk about how we're going to respond in this tough on crime approach. We need to be smart on crime, as I stated from day one. And so to sit here and say that, they don't support certain policies, but that's been the rhetoric that the career prosecutor, which my other panelists have touted, is their experience, and they can continue on with the career way of prosecuting, one size fits all. So I'm for building trust in the community and giving people who are hardest hit with the violence in their community a voice, and that's what we should do as prosecutors. That's what we should do as community leaders, and it's gonna take all of us, not just the rhetoric of one type of crime in one place, but we have to have a comprehensive approach, and that's what I bring different than anybody on this panel.
It would definitely appear so that we do put more resources into certain areas versus others. Can I tell you why? No, because I'm not the circuit attorney yet. But I can tell you as the next circuit attorney, when I was talking about this focused deterrence program, that when we bring all the relevant stakeholders together, then we're going to focus on the areas that have been most neglected for far too long and in the most violent areas, and provide as many resources as we can. Now, I can only come up here and make that commitment to you. But I can also talk about, yes, I am a career prosecutor. I'm proud of that. And one of the things that I'm proud about is the fact that I've been going out into the community since day one as a prosecutor. I made it a goal from day one to go out to as many neighborhood meetings as I could. I won awards for that, and it was before I had the faintest idea of that I wanted to be a prosecutor. And what we need to do, instead of pointing fingers at people saying that they're career prosecutors, is sitting at the table and working together to address these issues. And that's what I intend to do as your next circuit attorney.
I do think that resources are not provided equally across the city. I saw it as a police officer. I see it now with the school district, and I see it just as a citizen. Why that occurs, there's probably a number of reasons. Some of it is the media that portrays certain segments of St. Louis in a different light that they portray other parts of St. Louis. More affluent areas seem to get more protection or more resources. Why that is, I don't know. I don't know if it's because of the city elected officials in one area are more powerful than another one. I don't know what the causes of those are, but I know it needs to change, and I think that everyone in St. Louis, regardless of where you live, regardless of your race, regardless of your background, everybody should be treated equally and fairly, and everybody deserves the same law enforcement and same city services regardless of where you come from.
So this is an issue that has been referenced a few times tonight, but we would like to address it specifically and give everyone a chance to speak on it. Statistics on drug usage consistently show roughly equivalent rates of drug use across racial categories. However, blacks and Latinos are consistently arrested, charged, convicted, and sentenced at a significantly higher level than whites. As circuit attorney, what would you do to address this specific disparity? Let's start with Ms. Gardner.
Excuse me. Of course, is really having real alternatives, because even in the drug court program we have right now, if you have a gun charge as well as a drug problem, you can't get into drug court. So we need to have real services to address these real issues. We're not going to have this cookie cutter individual coming into the system without multiple different charges. So we need to have treatment in terms of mental health as well as alternatives to drug treatment, but we have to also open it up to we have a variety, a range of people who may not be the squeaky clean, no prior offenses, may have one arrest, may have another prior drug offense, may have different issues that we need to address. So we need to come up with a more comprehensive plan, and that's why I tried to do as a state representative and pushing for alternative diversion sentencing program that gave judges discretion based on that individual with consulting of defense attorneys as well as the prosecutor's office to come up with real solutions to address these gray area cases. But we want to have these talks of alternatives, but we're really not going to address the problem until we really get to the root cause and give people treatment.
Mr. Hamacher.
One of the things that I would like to do is bring some implicit bias training to the circuit attorney's office. I reached out to the people over at Ameren in charge of diversity. I've gotten some great ideas about how we can start doing those kinds of training and having those uncomfortable conversations about some of the decisions that we're making. Another thing that we can utilize is we have the data available to us on our charging decisions, our sentencing. We need to look at that. I'm really impressed by the prosecuting attorney up in Milwaukee. When he first took office, he brought out an outside organization to look at some of those implicit biases in their charging decision. And after he discovered that there was differences in how they were charging certain individuals and it was by race, then he set in policies to correct that. I'm saying I think we have a lot of that data that we can already use and start looking at, are we making decisions based on race, and we're really putting in policies that will correct that.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon.
I think one of the things we need to look at is the discretion of the actual prosecutors within that office. As a police officer, I had a lot of discretion. It was my decision if I wanted to arrest somebody for a given offense. Some offenses, obviously, you had to make an arrest. Other offenses, it was up to me. I would like to, as circuit attorney, give the attorneys in that office more discretion, more latitude on offenses to charge. You don't always have to charge the highest offense. There are lesser included offenses. You don't always have to charge. So you could always make recommendations. So that would be one of the things that I would do as circuit attorney.
Ms. Carl.
I talked about this a little earlier when I addressed your death penalty question, and I made it broader and talked about sentencing, and that is that I would make it completely transparent and I would examine it. I would make it transparent in that I would put what our recommendation is on each case, is that I would publish it to the public on the website, and I would also talk at any community meeting, any questions that they have. And then the only way I can get that information is that we have got to track it. We've got to ask those hard questions. We have to look at, are we making different sentencing recommendations based on race? And we need to go one step further. We also need to say, are we making different sentencing recommendations based on race of victims? Because everybody deserves to be protected the same. Everyone deserves to have somebody stand up in court. And the sentencing has to be even and fair across the board. We need to look at, when we are screening defendants for alternative sentencing programs, restorative justice, mental health issues, treatment courts, do we have any bias? Are we treating everybody the same? And I would have all of that information available and open to the public because I'm accountable to them.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hamacher, you anticipated the next question actually in your answer. For those who don't know, there's a robust social science around implicit bias, or this idea that individuals carry many prejudices and biases, including racial prejudice, on an unconscious, not a conscious level. This research has produced well-established and refined implicit bias testing, which can reveal the nature and severity of these biases. Would you support the use of implicit bias testing in the Circuit Attorney's Office for hiring, training, and placement purposes? And we'll start with Mr. Hamacher.
See, I was good. I anticipated the question, right?
That was good.
Yeah, I mean, of course. That's one of the things that I'm really, really interested in. You know, it's something that's kind of brand new science over the last 10 years. I studied it a lot. Like I said, you know, Milwaukee, their prosecutor used it when looking at charging decisions. I think we can expand it looking at when we're looking at sentencing decisions, when we're looking at, you know, hiring of people or even firing of people. And, you know, what it's going to allow us to do when we start to implement those things, it's going to make our office much more transparent, like we're talking about. You know, you're going to know exactly why we're recommending certain things, why we didn't charge certain things, you know, the statistics on, you know, how many African Americans we have in our office, and all those things. So yes, I'm a big, big fan of that. I study it a lot. I'm really interested in it. I hope to bring a lot of that as your next circuit attorney.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon?
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of implicit bias training, and I would certainly bring that to the Circuit Attorney's Office regarding hiring, transfers, assignments, promotions. I just wish that we could have that for the entire criminal justice system, including the judges. I think everyone in this room has implicit biases that they may or may not know. I would love to have jurors have implicit bias training as well as judges, but my staff absolutely would have implicit bias training.
Thank you. Ms. Carl?
So a million years ago when I was in college, I was a women's studies major. So my entire educational background was based on the idea that you have to deconstruct. You have to be willing to take things apart and systems apart, because everybody walks into a room and says, of course I'm not racist. But we have to acknowledge that we all participate in a system that over time has been constructed a certain way, and that we have to do our part to take it apart. It was my passion back in getting my degree, and that I will bring that same passion to the Circuit Attorney's Office, that understanding that it's not just about talking to individuals or having basic training. It's about how do we participate in a system, and how does that system treat individuals differently.
So to follow up, would you commit to using implicit bias testing in your office?
Yes, sorry. I thought when I said I got excited about it, I was saying yes, excitedly.
Thank you. Ms. Gardner?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because most of the candidates have followed me from day one, who stated implicit bias training is very important. So that's been my platform from day one. And in terms of how we train the organization, is training it in a diverse way to also understand the community in which it represents. So it's not just inside that office, it's actually the interaction with the community, because at the end of the day, we have to build trust in the system. We can have all these programs, we can have all these wonderful prosecutors, but if we don't build trust in the system and have a prosecutor thought pool that deals with the community in a diverse way, implicit bias does not matter, because it's still looked at as in this one size fits all. So implicit bias is very important. And excuse me, I'm just tired up here talking. And I've been focusing on this from day one, and it's very important to this office moving forward.
Thank you.
So I'll ask one last question. We've spent the last 2 hours talking a lot about what it means for justice and transparency and accountability, and somewhat what reforms you'll bring to the table. But prosecutorial success is usually dependent on convictions. And so we talked a lot about diversion programs, and we talked a lot about what justice looks like. But the current system says the more people you send to jail, the more successful you are as a prosecutor. What is going to be different about your office if you are to be elected as circuit attorney? We're going to start with Mr. Harmon and move left.
Thank you. For me, success is not determined or measured by a conviction rate. I know that's what a lot of attorneys or prosecutors look at. If I convict one person for the entire year, provided that that is the right defendant for the right offense, then I'm successful. I'm not concerned about sending everybody to the penitentiary for cases that don't merit a conviction. So like I said, I won't be concerned with having a high conviction rate. I'm only concerned with convicting the right individual for the right offense.
Yeah, I mean, I've never believed that conviction rates are a good measurement for success, especially for a position like this. So I've always approached that we need to look at ways where we can keep people out of the criminal justice system. And so looking at the recidivism rate specifically, I would look at that as a measure of how successful our office is. The more and more people we can get out of the criminal justice system, whether it's through drug court programs, mental health court programs, other restorative justice programs, that's how I'm going to measure my success. At the same time, that's going to allow me, when I'm saving resources, to focus on violent offenders so we can hold them accountable. And I just want my prosecutors trying the tough cases, because I think that will send the right signal to the community when they're out there prosecuting individuals who are committing the violent crimes, and we're holding them accountable and not really worrying about whether or not they're going to get that conviction at the end of the day.
Now say that question again. Say it again, please.
Success is usually measured in the circuit attorney's office by the number of convictions. What's going to be different if you're the circuit attorney?
Well, of course, it's not about the number of convictions. It's actually about how you build trust in the community so we can focus our resources to, one, reduce serious and violent crime, at the same time reduce the recidivism rate, at the same time prevent mass incarceration of nonviolent low-level offenses. So my success will be based on these prosecutors focusing resources on the serious and violent crime, but actually at the same time building trust with the community, because regardless of what program we're going to talk about, even myself, it's not going to be successful if we don't have witnesses or victims who are going to come forward. It's not going to be successful if we have law-abiding citizens who are afraid of the prosecutor's office, just like they're afraid of the police, as well as afraid of the courts. Because at the end of the day, we have to prosecute these cases, and we have to build trust, because we won't have witnesses or jurors who will serve and to hold individuals accountable for the serious and violent crime that we face. So that's how I would measure success, is based on building community trust and preventing and reducing serious and violent crime.
The first time I lost a child sex case, I had to walk in and tell a 7 or 8 year old girl that I didn't get justice for her that day. That's what I thought. I didn't get it. And she said to me, Miss Pat, because my name's confusing, Miss Pat, that's okay. You believed me. That's success to me. Because what I believe is justice, what I believe is success as a prosecutor, is going into court and telling every victim that you'll stand up for them, that you believe them, and that you will fight for them. Every member of our community deserves that, and that's how I will measure the strength and success of my office.
I'll have 2 minutes for each candidate for closing arguments. We'll start with Ms. Carl, and moving right.
The reason I'm running for circuit attorney is not the other titles I've held as lead homicide prosecutor or assistant circuit attorney. The reason I'm running is that I'm a mom, and I'm tired of sitting across the desk from other moms, and they have lost their child to violence in our city. At best, I can tell them that I will fight for them in court, and at worst, I have to tell them that there is nothing I can do to hold the person who brought this heartache in their life accountable. So one of the most important things to me is establishing a witness protection unit. And I know with our limited time, I don't get the chance to tell you much about that today, but what I can tell you is the importance that we are able to provide support, protection, and care for the people who are willing to come forward. And I'm not talking about moving them like a crazy mafia movie out of state. I'm talking about real, practical ways that we can tell people when they're sitting down at headquarters and they've had the most horrific night of their life, where they peeked out their blinds and saw something in their street, that we can say, when they ask, who's going home with me tonight? Who's gonna be there when my kids get off the bus? Mary and Pat, are you gonna be there? I want to be able to answer yes. The circuit attorney's office is gonna be there. If you're willing to stand up to violence in our community, That's a hard thing to do, and I'm going to support you and be there for you when you do it. So we need practical ways to do that. But like many of us have said tonight, being tough on crime, that alone isn't enough. We have to be smart on crime. We have to support alternative treatment programs. We have to. And I am the only one in this race that has the experience and the know-how to know the difference. I've seen thousands of cases come across my desk, and it takes a seasoned and experienced person to know when it's time, when that person deserves the chance, when you can take a risk on somebody, whether they've got, because you can't, it's not a mathematical formula, it's not a number of priors. It's not what those priors are. It's a gut instinct about people, and I've got it.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gardner, we're going to give you 2 minutes to close your argument.
Okay. Why I'm running for this office is about how we do the 3 critical things that I stated. It's how we reduce serious and violent crime, it's how we reduce the recidivism rate, and it's how we reduce the incarceration of nonviolent offenses. But what prevents us from doing any of these things, and we hear rhetoric here, we hear different things about alternatives, diversions, all these wonderful programs, witness protection programs, none of these will work if we don't build trust in the community. Because just like some people will tell you that witnesses and victims won't come forward because they're afraid of the criminal element, but they're just as afraid of law enforcement that may escalate the situation when they see something going on. They're afraid of the interaction with the prosecutor's office that may be overzealous and over-prosecute. They are just as afraid of the courts, who they may think over-sentence them. So it's about building trust. You know, this past week, I went to a young man's death. He was murdered senselessly in the street. And we talk about violence. I lived 40 years of violence all my life living in North City, and I understand that there's systemic issues that we have to address as a next prosecutor, not just about the type of cases you prosecute, because guess what? We still have 188 murders, most of these murders unsolved, so that 1 or 2 cases that they do prosecute, that's good, but we still have over 68% of victims who are suffering because their loved one, that person has not been brought to justice. So we have to do something different because the decades-old approaches that we have used are ill-suited for the community challenges that we face today. And I bring those unique experiences as a former prosecutor to understand how we charge, who we charge, what we charge. As a nurse, understanding how the mental health issues plague why somebody's going into the system. As a state legislator, understand laws to make our cities safer. So when we talk about experience, we need to bring a unique, broad view of this office because I live every day in North City and I see the devastation and destruction, and I'm most proud to be a career neighbor in North City to see the violent crime, not just a career prosecutor.
I want to begin by thanking the organizations that put this on and the great crowd that we had. You know, we do a couple of these forums and sometimes we're there and there's 3, 4, 5 people that show up, so this is great. We have very, very big challenges here in the city of St. Louis in regards to violent crime, in regards to distrust in the criminal justice system. I've prosecuted some of the St. Louis's most violent offenders. I've been there on Mother's Day last year at a homicide scene when I had to see the family come and identify their 17-year-old boy. I've also been there when I've prosecuted 17-year-olds with non-violent gun offenses and successfully diverted them out of the criminal justice system. That's what we need from the new circuit attorney, someone who has that leadership abilities to recognize that we cannot continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And we can take both of these big challenges on at the same time. This focused deterrence program has a proven record of not only drastically reducing violent crime, but at the same time building trust between law enforcement and our communities. We have to invest in this program. We have to do that. And I say we because I can't do this myself. I recognize that. It's going to take a coalition of stakeholders in our city to do that, whether that's City Hall, whether that's the police department, community service providers, job providers, educational providers, our pastors in the North City, or our people in this room. Together is the only way that we're going to be able to do this. We cannot continue to point fingers and blame each other for St. Louis's problems. We have to sit at the table, have uncomfortable conversations, and move forward with progress. And as your next circuit attorney, I promise you I will be at that table. I will be working to address both these issues to make St. Louis a safer, more prosperous, and a more tolerant community. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So you all as prosecutors, you need to know the root of the problem. It is by design that you are dealing with violent people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, we want to be able to give Mr. Harmon a chance to give a closing statement. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. We have one more closing statement.
Ma'am. Thank you. So I want to say that we are not interrupting people expressing themselves because this position matters to her concerns. So that's why we're allowing that space to be filled, because we understand that people this is an emotional situation, especially when you're a person of color, especially when you're a mother who has lost children. So we're going to honor her and respect the fact that she did that in this moment. So I see a lot of people shaking their head, and that's for you, but those of us who convene this space, we're totally okay with that. So Mr. Harmon, you're going to get 2 minutes to conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I certainly understand and sympathize with that woman and her concerns. I think we do have a problem here with violence and the causes of it and the labeling of people. I'm running for St. Louis Circuit Attorney because we need to do things differently. I can do things differently. I have a background in dealing with crime, whether it be violent or nonviolent crime. I have several ideas that I think are very innovative, and I know I don't have a lot of time to talk about them, but I will stay around afterwards to, if anyone has any questions for me or wants to hear some of my ideas for crime reduction in the city of St. Louis. I hear a lot of candidates talk about day one. that they've done this from day one. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what day one means. Okay, is that the day that you decided you were going to run for office and then you started doing something, or is that means that you started last week? I have no idea what day one means, but I can tell you about myself. I've been very active here in St. Louis for many years, not just with the St. Louis Police Department. I serve on the board of directors for 100 Black Men. I've been with that organization for several years. I'm also on the board for Mound City Bar. I've been active in that organization for years. So as far as day one, I have no idea. Maybe they can tell you what that means by day one. So I'm asking for your support and your vote on August 2nd, and we can change the way we do things here in St. Louis. We can change the way we prosecute individuals, and we can change the criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we allow Nabil to come back and close the space out, there are a couple things. The last day to register to vote for this election is July 6th. If you are not registered to vote or you know someone who's not registered to vote, we have voter registration cards here sponsored by Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So please make sure that you are registered to vote. If you've moved, which happens a lot in St. Louis City, update your registration so that you have the right polling place. Also, when you walked in, you got a green card. How many of you have your green card still? It's by the Justice for Reggie Clemens campaign. Please fill that out and hand it put it on the table in the back as you leave this space. Those are my announcements. We want to thank all 4 of the candidates for participating: Steve Harmon, Patrick Hamacher, Kim Gardner, and Mary Pat Carl. And Nabil, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, I would like to thank everybody once again for attending our event today. There are some announcements that were out on the sign-in table. I know the next event that's coming up is the Re-Envisioning Public Safety Town Hall meeting, which is going to be at the St. Louis Gateway Classic Sports Foundation on this coming Thursday. So please make sure you have a flyer for that, and we would love to see all of you join us on Thursday at that event. The back of my shirt has a quote on it from Marcus Garvey, and it says that if you liberate the minds of men, you can liberate the bodies of men. And that's what we wanted to do today. So we didn't come here today to give you our personal opinions, and we didn't come here today to give you our side or tell you who we're voting for. We wanted to provide you with information. We wanted to give you an opportunity to hear from the candidates that are presented to you, and we want you to be able to make an informed decision when you vote on August 2nd. We hope that we were able to do that today. We were passing out some wristbands to people when they came in, so if you didn't get one, make sure that you sign in so that you can receive one of these. It says #WokeVoterSTL. It's very important for people to go and vote, but I think that a majority of the organizations think that more important than going to vote is to go vote and be educated, be awoke, and know who you're voting for and why you're voting for those people. Because just checking a box because it has a D or R or something like that is not good enough. We want to make sure that we are providing education to our people, to our members, so that you can make the best decision for you and your family and your household and your community. So once again, thank you for coming out today to become an educated voter, and we hope that we see you again at our future events. Thank you.